Hello everyone, this is Jayska from a Dominant6 YouTube channel, and this is going to be part 2 of the Gabby Petitio video that I was doing. I'm sorry I had to run to the restroom right fast. And also it's been storming here. I don't know if y'all can hear it or not. It's kind of went away now, but it's been storming really bad here. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And the rain has been pouring real hard and wind's been blowing and stuff. But anyways, I wanted to finish that video. And like I said, my own experiences too back in 2005 and stuff. When it became of my ex's mother and sister and stuff, they was just always making comments and jabs about and just kind of flaunting it in front of me like their new clothes. And like I said, every time they would come over here, they would always come over here when it was in the evening time, about dinner time, after I've cooked and cleaned or whatever, or they'd want to go out to eat all the time, and I'd never want to go with them. And then it just always made me uncomfortable too, because of how his mother was, how close he was to his mother. To me, it was abnormal because I wasn't brought up in the same environment he was. And his mom would always literally put her hand on his thigh, like as close as she could up his thigh and stuff. And just, she would just always make comments and comparisons and stuff. If it wasn't about his exes, or if it wasn't about just the way I was as being a mother, and it just felt like that nothing I could do or say or whatever was good enough for them. I never felt good enough for them. And they was always making comparisons over his brother's ex-wife and stuff too, that she was better than me and this and that and the other. And so I looked back then as going to the grocery store kind of like as an escape to get out of the house, because I would get cabin fever all the time. Well, anyways, that came to a boiling point one time whenever they had went out to eat, and they had went to grocery shopping, and then they came back in from grocery shopping, and I was upset because this was like a every single weekend thing back then. This was which my oldest daughter, was their first grandchild and stuff too. But this was also, it wasn't just a every weekend thing. This was almost as much as they could possible a weekly, everyday thing at evening time. And even one of my late neighbors had commented and said, "Don't you think it's a little bit strange at how they always show up and they're dressed, to the nines, and come supper time, they're always here at your house?" And I was like, yeah, but I couldn't do nothing about it or anything. But it got all over my nerves, and there was just a bunch of stuff that was piling up and was getting on my nerves. And I'm not saying I'm 100% innocent in this stuff. It's just that this is my channel, and this is my side of the story and stuff. So anyways, I won't get into it in this video, but I was having an online affair with another guy during this time, and that was also part of it that was leading up to it. And then, like I said too, it was my first child, and also all the other stress and just not having the money and stuff, and it kind of feeling like it's being flaunted and stuff in your face and stuff. Like, they was always talking about getting their hair done, getting their nails done. They would go and buy real expensive makeup, and every time they would go out in public, they both, him and his mom and sister, would always have a new outfit on, and kind of just, it made me feel like crap and stuff. And it felt like that they was always wanting to be bragged on and stuff too, because like if they bought anything for my daughter or whatever, they wanted to talk about it forever and just brag and brag and brag. And so it was just all building up on me. And yeah, you can say it was jealousy or whatever too, but it was getting all over my nerves. And he did not hold up for me, and he never would. And and he would never say anything bad about his family at all. And he would never talk to him, nothing. He was never mature about none of those situations. He was never able to conversate or nothing. And I told him how I was feeling. I tried to talk to him several times, tried to work out things with him several times. Anyways, what came to a boiling point is one time they had went to the movies, and that was another thing that they always did. Back then, they always would go out to the movies and go out to eat, and I would just be here for hours by myself. And no, I did not want to hang out with him and his family. I just wanted to be with me and my family, my daughter and him. But he never did want that. That's the only time he would ever go out and stuff is if his family would go. Because, in my opinion, he's just a mama's boy. That's all he'll ever be, or whatever. And so, anyways, and back then his mom really liked him. Like he was his favorite at that point back then. He's not now, but he used to be. Anyways, and whatever his mom says or does runs the roost to their lives with their the dad or whatever and everything. But anyways, so they had went to the movies, they had went shopping, and they had went out to eat, and then they went grocery shopping, and I just got it. I blew up, and that's when I blew up the biggest in front of them. They had never seen me act like that, and they had never seen me like any of the ways that I'd acted or anything that night. So whenever they came home, I wasn't talking to them. I was talking to him, my ex, and stuff. And we was in the kitchen, and I was putting groceries away. And I used to have this big dining room set table and chairs and stuff. My house used to look different than what it does now. But anyways, this was back in 2005. My daughter was 15 months old. And I was just like, I was upset. I don't remember everything word for word or nothing, what happened or whatever. But I was like taking it out on him and stuff. And I said something like, well, it must be nice. I would have liked to went grocery shopping or something other like that. I smarted it off and said that. And then his mom, she's a smart hind too, and she's always bad about smarting off and being real vocal, mouthy and stuff. She's always been like that. She's a smart AWS, but I'll put it nicely or whatever. But anyways, she's more than that. She's a BITCH. But anyways, in my opinion. But so she's like, I would have loved for someone to go grocery shopping for me. You gotta remember though, this was back in 2005, and I was a new mom. I was always in the house. We didn't have that much money or nothing back then, and we still don't. But anyways, it was kind of like an escape for me to go to the grocery store to get out of cabin fever because I didn't work and I didn't have the extra money to spend and go shopping and go places and do things. And yeah, his parents might would have probably paid for like my way to go out to eat or to the movies with all their big bunch or whatever, like his mom and sister and dad or whatever. But I didn't want to. I had never wanted to be like out with them or nothing. And a lot of times too, his aunt and uncle would go out places and stuff with him too back then. So it was like a big old clan, big old family thing. And that's just not how I was raised, so I wasn't used to that. And I wasn't used to as much affection as what him and his family have for each other and the closeness and I still ain't the closeness and stuff that they have for each other. And I just really thought it was real weird. I still think it's weird at how high up she would put her hand in front of me. He's supposed to be my husband. Says in the Bible, uh, leave your leave your mother and cling to your wife or whatever. But apparently that didn't take. But anyways, she would always just do that right in front of me. Put her hand. I don't think she does it much no more, but she used to and stuff. But anyways, she just put it up real high and stuff on his thigh, like pretty much right next to his crotch or his underwear line and stuff. She would do it to her husband too. It was so weird. Both of them sitting side by side because they just worship that woman. That whole family does. But anyways, so she made that comment. She's like, "Well, I wouldn't mind it if somebody went shopping for me or something over like that." And so I hauled off. I think I hauled off. I don't really remember for sure how it took place or nothing because it's been so long ago. And I guess I kind of like block it out of my mind and stuff because it's all traumatic and bad memories for me, obviously. But, anyways, I hauled off and smacked her. And then I smacked her up against the wall there, that little wall there of the kitchen, that wall right there on the other side of it, near the door frame. And anyway, she said, well, because she's got a big old mouth on her, like I said, she's a real sassy ass. Sorry, she's a bitch, but I ain't got no nice words for her, in my opinion, my experiences with her. But anyways, she's like, you'll never do
God damn it,
you'll
Jesse, get
never
off
do
my
that
knee.
again to me, because if you do that again to
Everybody
me,
just, oh
I'm
my
gonna
God, just take this out and drop him off
I'm gonna,
with
like,
it.
she's gonna beat me up or something, in other words, or whatever, smack me back or whatever. Like, in other words, she wasn't gonna put up with it, which I didn't do it because as soon as I did that to her, my ex ended up, I think he pulled my hair because I did that to his mom. I can't really remember for sure. I think he pulled my hair, and then he might have punched me or something. I can't remember. And then he goes and he punches the refrigerator that I used to have, and he put a big old um, like dent in the refrigerator. And then his stupid honey and sister, she was there, and in like that big dinette table that I used to have, they're real religious too. And I won't get into all that in this video. But anyways, so she picks up the chairs and she starts slinging them because me and him are cussing at each other. And like I said, his parents had never, they're real religious, and they'd never seen me cuss or nothing before. You know, they didn't know that I guess they didn't know that we fought to that extent, but we always did. We always did argue and cuss and stuff with each other. But like I said, we didn't start getting physically. And he was the first, even though he would deny it, he was the first to ever get physical with me. Um, but that was like 2 years after we dated. We dated 4 years before we got married. And we were two people that should have never got married to each other. Just like in my opinion, my parents are people that should have never got married to each other and should have never had children with each other. But you know what, it is what it is. Life is what it is. But anyways, so he punched in the refrigerator, and then I'm like still like arguing with every one of them. At this point, the dad, the mom, they're all saying stuff to me. They're not cussing or nothing, but they're raising their voices, and they're obviously taking it for him. And I remember it hurt my feelings back then because I cared for his parents and stuff back then. I even still a little bit cared for his stupid ass mom. But anyways, I really cared for his dad back then. And so anyways, I remember it broke my heart, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional to you all. It still kind of stuff still kind of bothers me. Not because I want relationships with him, that's already done in the past or whatever, but just because I don't know how to explain it. But anyways, like his dad, like I said, they're all real religious. And I do believe like his dad is what you would call a true Christian person. And so anyways, his dad was like, I have, and he was probably, I mean, I'm sure he was telling the truth. He had never, what he said to me is he'd never witnessed anybody in all his life act the way I did. And then I just said, huh, really? You know, because I was kind of in shock about it because I grew up with that environment. I grew up with that atmosphere. And I'm not making excuses or nothing, but I was used to it. like every day of my life, pretty much growing up and stuff. A lot of people were probably shocked by me saying all this stuff and don't believe me, like the locals and stuff around here, because they don't think that of my parents or nothing. But I grew up with like every day of my life that my dad would come home from work because he worked in the coal mines and stuff, and he would pretty much take his anger out on us or his stress out on us. And I was able to withstand it. I'm not saying I'm strong or nothing physically. I'm just saying I was, for whatever reason, able to withstand stuff stronger than what my dad or my mother or my sibling was, my brother or whatever. And so every day he would come home hollering and cussing, and he would never say, he would always say the worst ones, the ones you're not supposed to say. He would say GD like all the time, like 10 rows and or 10 times in a row or something, and the F word. So I mean, I got this stuff every day. So that's one reason why what attracted me in the first place. And that's what I thought I was getting too. Sorry, you guys. But that's what I thought I was getting with my ex and stuff. I thought I was getting his dad. I mean, not like being with his dad. I'm just talking like saying I thought he was going to turn out to be similar to his dad, like a good Christian man who worked hard to provide for their family and didn't cuss or abuse or hit or nothing on their wives or nothing like that. Didn't have hot tempers. But I was so young and dumb. And even though we talked about stuff like that, it doesn't matter. If a person is what they are, you can't change a person. No matter how many times you talk over things, no matter how much you think you're in love with a person, you cannot change a person. But, anyways, so after he punched my refrigerator, his sister starts acting crazy because she's a stupid ass. And she starts, like I said, they all try to pretend like they're real religious and stuff. But the only one I personally believe is religious or Christian, like, is the dad. But, anyways, he said that to me, and it kind of just broke my heart. And I realized then, like, he really probably hadn't ever seen, even all the times he worked in the coal mines with other people or whatever, he had probably never heard or seen anyone act or talk the way that I did. And it did. It broke my heart at that time. And then that's whenever, too, I realized, or I was starting to realize, anyways, just the different environments that we were from. And in my belief, even though he wasn't brought up in that type of environment, my ex and stuff, just my opinion. And I think he always uses it and as an excuse that it's my fault and you can't be around someone like me. It's not me. It's not completely me or whatever either. But I think it's just a choice. I think that that's his true self whenever he's with me over here. That's his true self. And he's just, in my opinion, he's just always in disguise when he's over there around them. He don't want them to know his true identity because he tried to blame it on like my family and stuff too. And I guess that's why I wanted that, because I knew I didn't, unfortunately, you do end up tending to turn out like whatever environment you're in. But I did not want that for my children. I did not want that for the rest of my life. But unfortunately, it is what it is. I'm still stuck where I'm at, or whatever. And that's what attracted me to him, though, because I thought because he had that environment, he had the opposite of what I had. I thought that's what I would end up with. But it wasn't so. But anyways, his sister started slinging my chairs and she just started saying stuff. She was not speaking in tongues. She was just saying all kinds of stuff and she was calling me crazy and she was calling me names and stuff. And she was saying I was possessed and I just looked at her and rolled my eyes and I said, God, you're stupid. Or something like that, you know. Then I went back over there towards his mom because his mom would not shut up. She was just talking, running her mouth like she always does, being a loudmouth bitch like she always is, and she would not shut up or whatever. So I ran back over there to her, and then he like gets a hold of me, and I don't really remember how he got a hold of me before, but I think he picks me up by my neck, or I think he that one time he got me by my hair and knocked me down. Then the next time he picked me up, I think by my neck, and I couldn't breathe. He was gonna kill me, and his his mom and I think his mom or it might have been when his dad said I can't remember for sure, and he pushed me up against the cabinets of the house there, and he was like choking me to death. And one of them said, I don't remember which one it was for sure, but it was just like they didn't care either, the way they said it. They was just like, well, okay, now put her down or something like that. And then whenever he did that, he knocked me down the cabinets, you know, and it ripped off the skin off of my back and stuff. But his mom and them, I kept telling him to leave and leave and leave, and they would not leave. And so, anyways, they finally go outside, but then they wouldn't leave. His mom is a bitch from hell, in my opinion, just like my mom is. And they're so similar, but yet so different. Anyways, though, so she kept telling my mom. My mom came over here at that point, and then she said they wouldn't leave until something was done with me. And so her and my mom got together, you know, someone that's supposed to love and care for me, but that's obviously not true. Someone that actually had my back and my side, but that's obviously not true. Anyways, so they said that they wouldn't leave until something was done with me. And so my mom was a smartass and a bitch too. And so she said, well, you got two choices, Jesse. You either load up and go to jail or you go to the psych ward. And so I started, because I knew they wouldn't shut up or leave me alone or just leave until something was done. So I came back in the house and my brother comes in. It was one of the times that he was not in like a jail, rehab, prison or something in his lifetime. So he comes over here to me and he's like, hey, which I do. I appreciate this from him in that incident. He's like, you know what you can do whenever, because he knew, because he's lived that life, you know. And so he's like, you know what you can do when you get up there to the jailhouse and stuff? He's like, you can get an APO on him for what he did to you. And I didn't know nothing about it, you know. I didn't know nothing about EPOs or nothing like that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that, you know, because I wanted to and stuff, you know. But I mean, I wouldn't know that I could even do it if he hadn't told me that. And I still appreciate him telling me to this day, but it didn't do no good. What ended up happening, we loaded up, and my dad was getting off work at that time. He was still working in the coal mines. And then mom was just like, you know how Jessie is, she's going crazy and everything, holding it and her talking, saying her poor ex's name or whatever. You know, just blaming me for everything, calling me crazy and stuff. And so we load up, and it was my mom and my brother and me in the vehicle. And then he loads up with his family. And then by that time, they're calling their whole family members, their whole clan, man. And getting them to come from Pike County. His uncle, his aunt, his brother. the whole clan buddy at that time. And then they get my daughter, because obviously I can't be around her because I'm crazy. And so, anyways, we load up, we go to the courthouse, and then I go in there and I try to get in front of him because I know exactly how his old bitch mom is. And so, I try to go to the cops first in the courthouse, and I start filing a report to get an APO against him and telling him what happened and stuff. And I remember that guy, everything about him, the cops, what they looked like, the people that worked at the sheriff's department and stuff at that time. It don't do no good though, it's just photographic memories. I'm sure those people don't even work there no more. But anyways, and then he comes in with his whole family at that time. And then his mommy starts running her mouth, like always. And they figure out what I'm doing. They separate us. And they're like, they're like, what is she doing? And they figure out that I'm getting an EPO on him. And then they all just start saying, I'm the one in the fault, and I'm crazy, and all this and that. And so that stupid fat ass bastard that I was filling out the EPO with that worked there at the courthouse at the time, he don't work there no more. But anyways, he rips it up right in front of me. He rips up the EPO and puts it in the trash just because his old freaking mom comes in there and starts running her mouth, trash talking me and stuff. And then while I'm sitting there, and they're like taking pictures of both him and me, because I bit him. The reason I bit him was because he was choking me to death. And I was trying to get him to let loose in my throat from choking me. So I was biting him as hard as I could when he had me up in the air and he was choking me. And so he had to get a rabies shot back during that time because of that. Because the human mouth is nastier than, an animal or whatever. And so, but that's why, because I was trying to make him let loose in my throat. He was going to kill me, and he didn't care. But, anyways, as I was sitting there, um, like I said, my oldest daughter was 15 months old at the time, and she was the only child that I had. And so, before when I had my oldest daughter, I had her down here at the local hospital that's Weisberg Hospital, closest to me, the ARH or whatever. And one of the nurses at the time, I don't think her husband or her have any involvement with the courthouse or nothing no more, but I could be wrong. But anyways, she was my nurse at the time whenever I had my oldest daughter. And so she remembered me and I remembered her whenever I was sitting there. And as I was sitting there, whenever they was taking him in to get his pictures taken, and then they went and took me in to get my pictures taken, like of the abuse or whatever. I come back out and I sit in the chair, and that girl, the nurse, she was just there for her husband. She just happened to be there because her husband was a police officer, and everybody's against me, obviously. But she's sitting there looking at me in my shirt and stuff, and she's like, this happens to me every time, it seems like, in so many of my stories of abuse or whatever, or fighting. But she's like, look at her back. And then she's like, she's bleeding up and down her back. You got to take pictures of that. And so they finally go in there, and she actually went in there, I believe is how it went. She went in there with her husband, and they took pictures of my back and stuff when it was bleeding. This was a long time ago, before they moved the courthouse around and did remodeling and different things. But so anyways, they take pictures, and then I guess they're waiting on my mom probably was the very one who told them. I'm assuming, I guess. And so at that point, they're waiting to take me. They wasn't going to take me to jail. I told them just to send me to jail or whatever at that time because I knew that none of them would shut up until something was done. And so they wouldn't put me in jail for whatever reason. And so they ordered like this. I don't know what his was for sure, but I think he was like a psychiatrist or something. They're like waiting on him, and this guy that was about 5 years older than me or something in school, he was working with him at the time. And I had seen that psychiatrist before in the past in like my younger years and stuff, but we're not going to get into all that in this video. But anyways, so I already knew him and had my opinions of him. So anyways, he gets there, and I guess they're wanting to evaluate me or whatever to see if they want to send me onto the psych ward or whatever. And so they put me in this little room that's right next to the where the police station was or whatever. And he takes me in there to ask me questions, and he didn't even ask me questions of the fight or what happened or nothing like that. He asked me like 2 or 3 questions, and then he got to, have you ever been molested? And then I just started crying. And I wouldn't answer. I refused to answer that question because I'm not the type of person that I like to tell lies or make up stories, or I don't lie that much. I'm pretty honest as a person for the most part. Obviously, there's some stuff, no one is perfect, and besides Jesus, and there's also a lot of stuff I do have to lie about, unfortunately. I hate lying though, but yes, there's stuff that I do have to lie about, and that you won't get the whole truth out of me. But for the most part, I'm pretty honest. And I didn't want to lie about it. And I just remember he asked me that over and over, and he's like, "Oh, so you're refusing to answer the question?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And because I said that, he's like, "Well, we're going to take you to a psych ward then." So I was automatically took in a police car. I don't think I was handcuffed or nothing, but his wife did go with me. And him, she sat near him in the front. And I remember on the way there, he was going so fast, and he was playing his music so loud, and I was shivering and shaking. And she stood up for me back then, and she was like, "You're scaring her to death," because he was like flying. I mean, he wasn't talking to me or nothing because his wife was there, and he had a pretty wife and stuff. And so, anyways, he was just being a ho cop, is what he was being, or whatever. And he just believed, my exes and his family and stuff. And so she's like, "You need to slow down, and you need to quit playing that music so loud. You're scaring her to death," and everything. And after that, he drove me to Hazard. That's where the psych ward is and stuff. And I was put in the psych ward. And I won't go into my psych ward story in this video, but I'll just say it like this. I did end up having to stay the mandatory. That's why I wouldn't answer that question too, is because I was molested and I didn't want to lie about it, obviously. And then I ended up staying the mandatory, I think it was 72 hours at the time. And I have a whole different, I'll tell you my psych ward story a different day. But at that time I was going through, I thought I could make it back up with my ex-husband and work things out with him. And I wanted to move. I wanted to move even then. I never wanted to live here. Never, ever, ever wanted to live here. I only thought that I'd only have to live here for like a couple years or maybe like 3 years or something, and that we would move somewhere else. And I never wanted to live here. But I thought maybe I could convince him to get like a better paying job or move away from here. And I actually wanted to move to Tennessee. And I was like, and we moved to Tennessee and stuff. I was like begging with him and stuff. I was trying to, even though I was having an online affair, I'll tell about that in a different video. I was thinking, and I was still in love with him and stuff partially. And I still loved and cared for him, and I thought we could make things work. And I wanted to for my daughter too, obviously. And I don't know, but I stayed in there for the 72 hours. And then at that point, I did not want to come home either. I did not want to come back to this house. And so I started talking it over to one, because you get therapists and stuff when you're in the psych wards and stuff, and doctors and stuff. But anyways, I started talking it over to one of the therapists that I had, and asking if there was like a woman's shelter or anything like that that I could go to for domestic violence or whatever, because I didn't want to go back home. I kind of thought that I wanted to. No, at that point, I didn't think that we could work things out. My bad. It wasn't until I went to the domestic violence shelter. Cause see, I stayed an extra day in the psych ward because I wanted to, because I didn't want to come back home and stuff. But what had happened was my sibling. He had been in the psych ward so many times. He's a he's he's got a high IQ, and so he remembered the numbers and stuff for the psych ward and stuff. And he ended up calling one time on the payphone and getting a hold of me while I was in the psych ward and telling me kind of like what was going on a little bit. And then I'd talk. Back then we used to be close. Me and my sibling was. We was actually close, genuinely close back then, to a point or whatever. And anyways, I told him, or I think I did anyways. I think I told him that I didn't want to go back home. And then I started talking to the therapist and stuff there, and they started acting like, well, maybe if I could stay one more day, they would try to check in to see if they could get me a spot in the domestic violence house that was nearby. And so I agreed to it, and that's what I wanted to do, because I was wanting to get a divorce from him when I was in the psych ward and stuff. And it wasn't until I was in the, I stayed another night at the psych ward, and then whenever I got released, and they came and picked me up in a van, I think, and they took me to this place in Hazard. It's for women. It's a women's shelter for domestic violence, and they enrolled me there. And then I think what happened was that's whenever I started getting the emotional feelings of like, I don't know if you want to call it being bipolar or what, but that's whenever I started thinking, oh, I messed up. I wanted to work things out with him or whatever. And so I think what happened was, I could be wrong, I can't hardly remember, but I think I walked next door to the food city there at Hazard and used a payphone. And I called him and got a hold of him and talked to him. Then whenever I talked to him and stuff, they allowed me like to visit him for an afternoon or something, but I had to be back by a certain time. And that's when we went to Jenkins, and we looked at this house beside the Jenkins lake across from the Mexican restaurant. And he was wanting to make things back up with me too, but he told me at that point that was the first time I ever had social workers on me. And because we got in a fight in front of my daughter that was 15 months old, we got social worker, or I got social workers on me or whatever for the first time. And so he told me that they was going to open up a case on us or me or whatever, and that they'll be there at the house whenever I get out or whatever. But I was planning, before I even made the phone call to him, I was planning at that time to divorce him. But then whenever I started getting the feels, or whatever you want to call it, from when I was staying in a domestic violence shelter, um, I went off to make phone calls to him, and I went out that one evening, and he acted like, oh, he would move or do whatever I wanted to. We'd work things out, and he'd see what he could do, or we would change or whatever. You know, he was filling me full of crap too, or whatever. And so, anyways, we went back to each other, and I stayed at the domestic violence shelter for like 3 days too. So altogether, I was gone for like 6 days. But and I hated it. I mean, obviously I hated it, but I breastfed back then. That's when I had breast, and my oldest daughter's the one that I breastfed the longest, and I breastfed her. That's what made me stop breastfeeding her was because she was yanked from me pretty much. You might as well say, because where I had to go to the psych ward and stay, and when I went to the domestic violence shelter. I was even thinking when I first got to the domestic violence shelter and they showed me how it worked and stuff. And I was even going to have like, I had a room to myself. And I had like a crib and stuff for my daughter there that they had offered to me from that domestic violence shelter that they provide for women and stuff. It's really nice and everything. It's a lot bigger than what it looks like too from the outside, but uh, I don't know. It just ended up not being that way. Especially, I think whenever I realized when he told me that the social workers were involved now, because either way I went, the social workers were going to be involved. And that's one reason I say I don't give one crap for social workers. I don't think that they're worth a damn dime. And I think that that whole system should be done away with. I think social workers, every last one of them, are pieces of shit. And that's just my opinion. But, in my opinion, it's the only one that matters because this is my channel and I'm not taking it down. So if y'all, if y'all feel differently. But, anyways, I haven't never met a social worker that I've thought anything of in my whole lifetime, and I've met a bunch of them. So, anyways, that's just my opinion. There ain't no allegedly to it. Truth is the truth. So, anyways, after that happened, when I came home and stuff, we just tried to work things out or whatever, and it is what it is, or it was what it was at that time or whatever. But I guess what I'm saying in general is, and I know this too because we had meetings and stuff at that domestic violence center. And a lot of the other women, there was only like 4 or 5 other women in there, different ages. I was the youngest at the time that was in there. And we would have meetings and stuff, and they would tell their stories. And every time, including my story, it was the same thing with women in fighting and stuff, and even like that. I don't know what the person was that was like going over the meeting. I don't know if she was a counselor or what she was, because she was a young girl. She was like a college student. She was younger than me. She just volunteered on the weekends and stuff during that time. But she was like having a meeting, and she would like play games and stuff with us. But anyways, she would say like every time too, like a man and stuff, whenever they're trying to be abusive towards a woman, most all the time a man will grab you by the throat, and that's what it is. He's trying to shut you up. And that's true. That happened in my case every single time almost. And also with them other women and their stories and stuff, every single time a man tries to show his dominance by shutting you up and stuff, and he'll choke you. That's what a lot of domestic violence and deaths and stuff from women happens. And I think it's the same thing with that Gabrielle, or something similar to her story. But I don't know. That's just from my experience with it all. And I know a lot of times too around here where I live at in eastern Kentucky, these women, these older women, just like how sickening it was on that Gabrielle's story of her soon to be mother in law taking up and writing that letter and saying what she said she'd do to protect her son. It brings back the same feelings and the same, I believe, circumstances of how my ex's mother is and how she would still be for him and how she was over my ex and stuff and that whole family because they're cleanish like that. And like I said, that woman, um, just like I felt with that Gabrielle, that woman ran the roost, that woman, his mother, and I feel like that my ex's mother runs the roost to that clan. And that's just how it happens. But I know years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, um, one of the therapists around here, and she's actually at one of the clinics that I go to, one of the top therapists over that section. She said she just kind of made like an excuse for it, which is nonsense and stupid. But anyway, she said, yeah, a lot of these women around here, which is true, but it don't make it right. And she's like, a lot of these women just have Appalachian mother syndrome. And in other words, that kind of like their mommy's boys, and they'll hold up and protect them and do whatever for them no matter what. And I think it's true because my mother's like that over my brother, and his mommy was like that and still is over him. Like they can do no wrong, and they blame everything and turn everything around on the females. And I don't care how big. I know women can be big too. I know women can be abusive too. And I know men do get abused by women too. But there is no competition between a man and a woman. I don't care how big the woman is, on a woman beating on a man like that. There's the strength is no comparison. A female is fragile and stuff compared to a man, especially a man who's toned or just got a lot of natural strength or whatever, the way their bones and their structures made and stuff. Then you got to add into all the other factors of a woman having babies, a woman having disabilities, or whatever. Even if, no matter what, I don't think that men like that should be held up for just because their mommies want to claim that they have Appalachian syndrome, mama syndrome, or in other words, they're mama's boys, and that's what it comes down to. Same thing with that Brian that murdered Gabrielle. His mommy had that, obviously. And I think his mommy played, in my opinion, a big role in her unaliving. And I think that BITCH, from what I seen on the television series or whatever, I think that her honey should be right there in jail, rotting away, in my opinion. And I don't know why she's not. But, anyways, I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and feelings and opinions on it from my experiences and stuff. But it's a sad, sad situation and sad, traumatic story. And I don't know. I think women, sometimes you just don't have no way out, you know? And it's unfortunate. It really is. It's sad and unfortunate. And it's really sad and unfortunate that women can't stand up for other women and they're against women just because they're so much for their sons and don't see no wrong in their sons' behavior and think it's okay to use and abuse females just like they're trash, just like they're garbage. But that's all just my my experiences and my opinions. And I know it sure don't as hell not make you no saint for holding up for someone who does that kind of stuff. Even if a woman starts an argument or cusses or whatever back, it sure don't make you no saint holding up for them and stuff, and then just trying to get at another female like that because you want to hold up for your mommy's boy or whatever Appalachian syndrome, mother syndrome, or whatever the heck they want to come up with next, just to come up with something to say, in my opinion. But I'm gonna get off here, you guys. That was just my thoughts, my opinions on the Netflix series part 2 of my opinion of the Gabrielle Petitio or whatever you say her name story, and it's just really sad and tragic.
I don't know why my
And
side
I'm
is
gonna get
red.
off here and I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks for watching. Talk to you until next time. Thanks. Bye.